Now, in other top stories today, the State Security Director General Arthur Fraser has been removed from the agency. He's now working at the Correctional Services Department with immediate effect. The move comes after consultations with President Cyril Ramaphosa and State Security Minister Dipuo Letsatsi Duba. Fraser's removal from the State Security Agency also comes amid court action from Inspector General of Intelligence Setlumamaru Dintwe. Dintwe is accusing Fraser of meddling in investigations into a parallel intelligence network. Fraser, also known as the spy who saved former President Jacob Zuma, was the sole recipient of the intelligence gathered by the program. Now, in his book, The President's Keepers, journalist Jacques Pauw alleges Fraser's been heading up a parallel intelligence network, as you've heard, which wasted up to R1 billion of taxpayers' money in just 3 years. Pauw joins us now in studio for a bit more detail on the story. Jacques, good to have you with us in studio this afternoon. So we've scraped the surface of exactly what was mentioned in your book, but take us through into some of the detailed allegations you published about Arthur Fraser.
At the time, and we're talking about between 2007 and 2010, Arthur Fraser was a Deputy Director General at the then National Intelligence Agency, which became the State Security Agency. He set up an intelligence network by the name of PAN, the Principal Agent Network. Wasted R1 billion of taxpayers' money. What they did, for example, is they appointed 72 new agents for whom they purchased almost 400 cars. They purchased houses and farms to the value of, I think, 58 million rand. Then they leased these properties back to state security. They imported 3 spy wagons from the United Kingdom for 40 million rand, and there was lots of money being moved around. Amongst the people that they appointed as agents were convicted criminals. Family members were appointed. Fraser's own son, for example, was the manager of the warehouses in which they stored the cars. There was also an incident, for example, where 10 million rand was channeled to an NGO where Mrs. Fraser, his mother, was one of the directors of the board. There were 2 investigations against Arthur Fraser. The one was an internal investigation by State Security themselves, headed by an advocate and an auditor. They found widespread theft and corruption. They also found that Fraser had set up a parallel intelligence network in that in his house he installed a server. All the reports from these agents, these new agents, went into the server in his house, and he then decided what he was going to send to the mainframe at State Security. The internal investigation at State Security regarded this event, this server in his house, as so serious that they recommended that he should be charged with treason, which is now being investigated by the Inspector General and led to the fallout between Dr. Dintwe and Mr. Fraser. Now, the allegations by the internal investigators at State Security were also investigated by the Inspector General of Intelligence. And she came to very much the same conclusions, although she didn't address the treason aspect. She also found widespread fraud and corruption. She found, for example, that Fraser had no management skills or little management skills. Now, what is absolutely incredible is that in 2014, the Inspector General of Intelligence handed her report to the then Minister of State Security, who was David Mashlobu. And despite being in possession of these reports, Mashlobu and the President then, Jacob Zuma, still appointed Fraser as the Director General of State Security. It's a very powerful job. I mean, they do surveillance, they do telephone tapping. You know, for example, when Pravin Gordhan was fired by Jacob Zuma, Zuma used a false intelligence report to fire his Minister of Finance. Where did that report came from? So it is very, very significant that he has been moved. He's one of the most powerful civil servants in the country. And I've said from the beginning there are 3 civil servants that need to go. The one was Tom Moyane as the Commissioner of SARS. He's gone. The other one was Arthur Fraser, and of course the other one is Sean Abrams as the National Director of Public Prosecutions.
So just going a step back, given what you have told us about what you believe Arthur Fraser is guilty of, how is it possible that, first of all, he hasn't been suspended while the Inspector General of Intelligence's probe into him continues, and secondly, that he's simply been moved to another...
There's far more to the move than meets the eye. There were, and I've heard this from impeccable sources, there were meetings between the President and Fraser where they discussed his resignation. The President was not willing to accept his resignation because he wanted to keep Fraser inside. You must remember that State Security and Fraser had already gone rogue when he withdrew the security clearance of the Inspector General of Intelligence. The IGI is the only person in the country, and that includes the President, who has oversight over state security. He can walk into the state security offices, he can demand any file, he can look at any project, he can speak to anyone he wants. The fact that Fraser suspended his security clearance and refused to give him documentation and people to talk to meant that state security had gone rogue. And I've been told that the President regarded Fraser as such a risk that he didn't want to risk suspending him and leaving him out in the cold, and that he decided rather to keep him inside. And that's why he was moved to correctional services where, I mean, I feel sorry for correctional services, but where he probably can't do that much damage. The investigation against Fraser will go on, and I've heard that charges against him is imminent, and that might include charges of treason.
So let me ask you, should we as South African citizens be comfortable that a man accused of all of the allegations you've listed still works very much in government, in a senior position, and might still have some reach from where he is?
No, he shouldn't be in government. I think what is even more alarming is that Fraser's number 2 and number 3 in state security were people who were with him in the PAN project. They were also managers in the PAN project and might well be complicit of fraud and corruption as well. Now, what is very significant is when Fraser was moved, they didn't appoint the number 2 or 3 at State Security as the acting Director General, but they brought in Mr. Jafta from outside the intelligence structures to be the acting Director General. I think it's important that the fact that Fraser's cronies are still in state intelligence should be addressed, and should be addressed very seriously. But I think it is a significant move that he's gone, that he's being moved from state security.
If all of this is true, Jacques, why would the President be afraid of a man like Arthur Fraser?
Because I think Fraser has got significant resources. Even if he suspends him, Fraser might well be still in contact with his number 2 and number 3 in state security. At least Fraser is, at the moment, is in a place where the President can keep an eye on him. If he suspends him, or if he accepts his resignation and Fraser leaves altogether, we don't know what resources Arthur Fraser has. We don't know what agents he has out there. We don't know whether the remnants of PAN is still alive and is still going on.
Can we not assume that Arthur Fraser may be upset about this move enough to engage that network anyway?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt in what he's saying, and he should be very, very carefully watched, and I believe he will be.
All right, thank you for your insight into that story, Jacques Pauw. Journalist and author Jacques Pauw is the writer of The President's Keepers.